Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to invite Rich Brooks. He is the president of Flyte New Media, the founder of the Agents of Change podcast, Agents of Change website, newsletter. The topic that we wanted to talk about today, which is kind of branding and brand building. And I specifically wanted to talk to you about using events as kind of a PR tactic to build your brand. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today for listeners. Just want to remind everyone, like, subscribe, share this stuff with your colleagues, comment, interact. The more that you do, the more I can have great guests like Rich on. How you doing, Rich? Thanks for joining.
I'm doing great, Vince. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Did I miss anything there? I know Agents of Change is you have the conference, which has maybe taken a hiatus, might be coming back, but podcast, newsletter, website.
Yeah, that's all the AOC stuff. And then also Tech Guru on the local NBC affiliates up here in Maine. So once a month, I get to go and talk about hard-hitting news stories like how to take better pictures with your smartphone or how to prepare your kids for going back to school with their laptop.
I love it.
Journalism there. Yeah.
Well, look, I think this is kind of a segue into the topic that we wanted to talk about today. Let's start at the top here. You've been putting on the Agents of Change conference annually since 2012, though you are taking a hiatus, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we hope to bring it back. It was just a matter of, changing priorities. I don't know if you've heard about this AI thing, but apparently it's really big. So we decided to focus on that for 1 year, and there was only so many initiatives that we could do. But basically, that's actually one of the things that I talk about in terms of putting on an event. It is a lot of work, and that actually becomes a hurdle for other people just kind of mimicking you. So it's kind of got a built-in barrier to entry.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, tell us a little bit about why you initially started it so people can kind of wrap their heads around, if that is right for them.
Yeah, because I don't know that it's right for everybody. And when we first started, it was 400 people, which is a pretty big event, especially in Maine. I think the reason I started it is I like putting on events. I like being on stage. I enjoy being able to share ideas and teach people. And I find the stage one of my favorite ways to do it because I like the interactivity of it. And I had gone to I was suddenly going to these national events, either as an attendee or as a speaker, things like Blog World and NMX and South by Southwest and Social Media Marketing World. And I just kind of got the impression that, I saw that there weren't a lot of Mainers who were going to these events. And so my thinking was, what if I just created my own event, maybe a little bit downsized for Maine, and put it on myself. And that became the impetus of the Agents of Change conference. So I started bringing in speakers from away to bring in fresh ideas. And it just became this thing that I enjoyed getting up there on stage. I got to headline my own event. I also got to bring in speakers from all over the country and have them share their best ideas with other marketers and business owners from Maine. So that was kind of the original reason for doing it. And then over time, I discovered it actually became a great lead gen magnet for Flyte New Media, my agency as well.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because I think one of the big things that people ask right away is like, well, what are we going to get out of it, right? So it's tough to quantify something like, oh, it builds your brand, right? But if you're talking about lead gen, that's obviously one thing that's quantifiable. But tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so for me, one of the things that I notice, I'm sure you do the same thing or most business people do, is when people come to you and say, we're interested in working with you, you always ask, how did you hear of us? And I found that more and more people were starting to say, oh, I've been attending the Agents of Change for years, but I'm finally ready for a website or search engine optimization or social media, whatever it might be. And because I was up there on stage and because I was, branded as Flyte New Media and branded as the Agents of Change, that got us into a lot of boardrooms and offices that we wouldn't have gotten into otherwise. So it was kind of creating this thing that didn't require you to work with Flyte, but it still branded Flyte as a thought leader, somebody, especially me, who was connected to thought leaders and cutting edge marketers from around the country, sometimes from around the world. And that just raised Flyte's profile and it raised my own profile. So those things work together as well. And then it also becomes something that people want to talk to you about. Nobody's really interested when I go to events talking about the fact that I run a digital agency. Half the people there run digital agencies. But the idea that you put on an event, and once people hear that, at its peak, we had, 400 people or so coming into this event, and I was getting some of the top known speakers from around the country, at least in marketing, to come to the event, that's something people want to hear about. They start talking, and it's a great way of just kind of breaking the ice, so to speak, with a lot of people who may end up either doing business with us, or maybe they become vendors of ours or partners of ours. So it just opened up a lot more doors than would have if I just stuck to a podcast or just stuck to posting things on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say personally that I have felt even the podcast that we run, that this one that you're on right now, it's like that has opened up doors and started connection points. But, we have floated the idea of having a conference because realistically, they're on a lot of digital PR centric conferences. There are PR, more traditional PR conferences, although I found they are very small and they are very kind of industry specific. So there'll be like a tech PR conference and, whatever. So I guess that kind of leads me to the next question, which is like, are these good for everybody? And let's talk a little bit about the kind of what those kind of checkpoints are in your head, or the checklist kind of to determine if it is right for you.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's a lot of work. And, there are conferences of all sizes, and you kind of alluded to that. And I remember going to, Blog World that at the time had thousands of people. You go to South by, and it's like 10 times that. It's just, there are huge, huge events. But there's also small regional events that might just have 50 people or a couple hundred people. So I think it really depends on what you're looking to accomplish when you want to kind of create your own buzz. And also, it doesn't have to be super big, because it's more important. It depends on what your goals are. There's the raising of your profile, there's branding. I mean, because of this, I was able to negotiate deals with, local TV stations, with local press and all this sort of stuff. And I got extra press because of it. But there's also that situation where maybe you just want to get 10 of your best prospects in a room and teach them as well and call that an event. So you don't have to start big, and you can kind of see if this is the right thing for you. But if you have a message to share with people and part of your process is education, then events can be very powerful for you. And back in the day because people started coming to me, they're like, how do you put on your own event? And there was a time when I was actually teaching people how to put on their own events. And I said, there's 3 S's that I keep in mind, and it's seats, sponsors, and what's the last one? Third one going to be speakers. So those are the 3 elements that you need to consider. So speakers, are you going to be doing this by yourself, which is totally fine. In fact, we're actually putting on a smaller event right now we're calling Flyte School Live. It's just me and 2 of my coworkers, and we're doing a half day on content marketing and websites and conversion and measurement. So it could be very small. Maybe it's just you, maybe it's a teammate, or maybe it's more like a big event where you bring in speakers from around the country and tap into their audiences. Sponsors, you don't need to have, but it's a great way to generate revenue for the conference. Conferences take a lot of time and effort. Our goal is always to at least break even. So if we can get sponsors, they can help us pay for speakers, because if we're bringing speakers in from away, we've got to pay for their flights. I mean, not every conference does this, but pay for their flights, pay for their hotel, pay for a few meals. Sometimes for a keynote, we might pay for that. I know for other conferences, they don't pay anybody, and sometimes they pay quite a bit. And then seats is just everything you need to do to fill that space as much as you possibly can. So those are the 3 things that I recommend people pay attention to before they ever start trying to sell tickets.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down some notes because it does seem like definitely a big endeavor. And I don't want to get into like the nitty gritty of each of these, although we probably could, Rich, but I don't want to take up all your time. What are kind of maybe some of the biggest pitfalls that you have fallen into in the past? Maybe some mistakes that you made that this is for, people to stand out.
Yeah, I think part of it is just making sure that you're actually serving an audience, because everything falls apart if you don't have an audience. You can get away without speakers. You could be the only speaker. You could pull people from your team. Sponsors are nice, but the bottom line is you can make your money off of ticket sales, or there are other ways of doing that. So those are nice to haves, but if you're not going to get people into the seats, then everything's going to fall apart. There's no reason to bring in speakers if you don't have an audience for them to speak to. So say make sure that whatever the topic that you are going to cover, that it's really relevant for your ideal customers. We have a client here at Flyte, and they manufacture cement and like paver blocks and things like that. And they put on an event every year for their audience. Their audience are landscapers and hardscapers. So when they put together this audience, or when they put together this conference, all of the presentations and all of the speakers specifically about how to run a better business if you're a landscaper or a hardscaper. They get up and talk about some of their own products, but then they bring in other speakers and other companies likely who won't compete with them. And I've even spoken there a few years as somebody who comes in from a marketing standpoint and what a landscaper or hardscaper needs to consider when it comes to, say, local SEO or paid search, paid social, those sort of things. So I think they do a great job. They don't even charge them, their attendees for this. They get money from people who want to get an exhibitor booth. They get money from sponsors, but they're willing to take it as a loss leader because it builds loyalty for their audience, with their audience. So it really depends what your objectives are, but just making sure that you're serving an audience who's going to show up. Either show up and pay or show up and be an audience that then maybe exhibitors or sponsors would pay to get in front of.
Yeah, I love that idea of kind of really honing in on the value that you're providing. I like that example you gave there. Have you seen kind of on the flip side of this, because this is probably another challenge I can think of like as a brand, talk to me, I guess, a little bit about that balancing act of like putting your brand out there, but not making the show about you.
Right. And to be honest, we've kind of separated church and state in that, right? Because it's easy to have called this event Flight School like we ended up doing for our own small event. But originally this started as kind of like a side project for me because I was like, I just want to do something different. And then ultimately ended up pulling it back into Flyte because I needed help running it. I don't see a problem with branding it with your own company name and doing something like that if you're trying to make yourself the center, if you're trying to raise your profile. And obviously there is something lost. If a local reporter talks about the agents of change in a story, there's not an immediate connection for the reader that's Flyte New Media. So there's an argument that you probably should be doing it under your own brand. I don't think you need to hit people over the head with it once they're there. They're going to see your branding. I mean, for Flyte, we have a booth there. The people who work at our company are often the people who are like basically the volunteers, so to speak, helping people to their seats or answering questions, making sure that everybody gets lunch served on time, all those sorts of things. We have a booth. We answer questions. One of the things that we do is you can schedule a free consult with a number of members of my team, whether it's for branding, web design, digital marketing, and we just do that kind of as a service. But again, we're establishing our credibility. It's like, we know what we're talking about. You can get a free sample of that right now. Imagine what it would be like if you worked with us. And that's why the goal was always like, let's just pay our bills when it comes to this thing, because we consistently get business from these conferences. Almost invariably, somebody buys a website, hires us for SEO, hires us for some other sort of digital marketing, either right after the show is over, and then, or sometimes years later, but they know that when they're ready to make that decision or leave their current agency, they're going to at least consider Flyte New Media, and that helps raise our profile. And it gives us other things to talk about on social media as well.
Yeah. And again, just the through line there is that people are telling you, what you ask them where you've heard of us, and they're saying, we've heard of you through your conference.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we spend a lot of time doing measurement marketing as well. And so we're seeing traffic coming from our website for Agents of Change over to our Flyte New Media website, so we can see those kind of things too.
Yeah.
And then there's
Gotcha.
just always anecdotal stories that somebody has me on a podcast because I'm Agents of Change, and that's more interesting than, say, Flyte New Media. But obviously there's benefits to, all boats rise with the tide.
Right. Well, Rich, now tell me a little bit about, because you mentioned pieces of this, but getting the word out for this, right? Putting that seats, the last S there, putting people in the seats. I was going to say people, is it a P? So how do you get people in the seats? How do you get the word out? What are some tips?
Sure. So obviously we've got a website for the Agents of Change. So we have a destination to drive people to where they can learn about the conference as well as the podcast. And we've done a summit in the past too. So they can learn all about that. There's some place to send them. We are regularly posting content on social media. The primary driver of Agents of Change content is the podcast that we do. Obviously, you were a guest. You saw some of the stuff that we do. We do promotions on social media, generally unpaid promotions for the podcast. We send out a newsletter to all of our subscribers. We also leverage the Flyte New Media list. And very often when we send out our email newsletter for Flyte New Media, down underneath the main story is some of the more recent episodes that we've done on the podcast for people who are interested in learning even more. And then when we're ready to actually launch the website, we do a little bit of build up, getting ready, don't forget to sign up for this mailing list. We're going to give everybody who's on our list ahead. We've got a certain number of discounted tickets. We're going to alert our list before we go public with it. So it's an incentive to get on the list. And then we send those out. And then it's, basically that grind of email marketing. Every month the price goes up. So at the beginning and end of each month, we're talking about price points. During the rest of the month, we're talking about the speakers and other things that are going on. We work with the speakers to create collateral for them to share on their social media and other content as well. And then because I do have that opportunity to be the tech guru on a local TV station once a month, they have been kind enough almost every year to let me go on and talk about digital marketing and then tie it into the conference.
Nice. Yeah.
And then we take that 5-minute clip that was on the local NBC stations, and then we spin that into even more content to raise awareness. And quite honestly, sometimes it also comes down to running ads on social platforms. And it also comes down to doing some manual LinkedIn research, outreach for me. And in years past, I had a script and it was copy and paste to all marketers and owners in the state of Maine, just, copy, paste. More recently, I actually kind of broke my own rule and I leveraged an automated service, which basically was doing the same thing. It was just taking me out of the loop from having to copy and paste every single day for hours on end while I watched, local sports, Duck Soup. So that was just a tool that I used to kind of like manually or automatically do those outreaches to people and giving them a reason to drive traffic to the website. And then we did some retargeting ads as well.
Yeah. One of the first things I wrote down when you were talking initially was, why does it take so much time? Because that was one of the first. So I think you've answered that pretty thoroughly there. I mean, I don't like
well,
this.
And it's not just that. It's all my team's time, and it's dealing with the event space and choosing the right meals for everybody. And don't even get me started on how difficult it is to make everybody happy when it comes to lunches. Like everybody was like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's fine when we ask them on the intake sheet. And then all of a sudden it's like they get there and they're like, oh, I think I'm gonna have a salad. No, those are for the vegetarians only. What do you, it's just like, I once got yelled at because they only had soda, and she's like, you should be having healthier. This was a long time ago. We now have many healthier choices. But, it's like you can't make people happy when it comes to food. The best you can do is not piss them off. So yeah, there's a lot of logistical issues. And then helping all of the virtual assistants plan the trips for their people and working with the hotel. And then, I don't pay my speakers, so I like to give them gifts. So we work with all these local Maine-based companies to get these gifts so we can give them these awesome gift bags filled with things. And then it turns out, well, you can't bring beer on, 6-pack of beer on the flight. So I guess you're going to leave those here with me. Just a lot of little things you'll learn over the years.
Goodness. Yeah. Well, yeah. The other thing I was going to ask, I guess now is like getting into the speakers and choosing speakers. Sounds like one of the first things is try to avoid the high maintenance ones, right?
There's no avoiding high maintenance. I mean, hopefully I'm not one. I don't know. I should be careful what I say. No, we've been very good. For us, we don't have a call for speakers, which we get so many people who want to speak. And our rule has always been, you come on the podcast first. And I don't know if I learned this from Mike Stelzner or we both basically play from the same handbook, but coming on the podcast gives me an opportunity to really get to know somebody and determine, are they going to be a good fit? Do they have something to share with my audience, or are they just a hype machine? And it's not just about whether or not they'd be a good fit. For me, I'm curating an event with limited speaker space. There's only so many speakers, only so many slots. So I can't have 2 or 3 people speaking on Google Ads because it's not a Google Ads conference. So I kind of, in my mind, have like 2 or 3 people I want to bring in, but I have the topics that I think primarily as main businesses, although we certainly get people from all over coming, but I focus on the main audience these days. What do main business owners and marketers need to know to succeed? And so that's kind of how I start to put this together.
Yeah, I love that. First thing that came to mind was, I went to music school. I studied jazz, saxophone, and like we'd have these performances, and it was, you put together a set list just like any band would. And it was, make sure you're going to have a slow song and then a fast one. And then, it's in a
Right.
waltz. So it sounds like it's kind of similar thing when you're putting on a presentation, like think about it in that regard.
Yeah. For me, it's a very curated experience that I'm trying to create at my own event. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but for me, it was like, what is the conference that I want to go to? I mean, when I put together my podcast questions, when I pull in the guests, like it's the same thing. It's like, what do I want to learn from this? Because I'm pretty, even though I think I'm maybe a little bit ahead of some of the people who listen to the podcast, basically it's for people like me. People who are trying to figure out marketing so they can get better at it, grow their business, and people who genuinely like marketing. So if I'm making something that makes sense for me, chances are it's making sense for the people that I'm serving as well. But a lot of
Yeah.
it, we also ask questions. We send out surveys. We're like, who do you want to see speak? And it's funny because Mainers don't seem to care about the personality. It's really about the topics. I had Jay Bear come in one year. Jay Bear, I mean, internationally known speaker. Nobody had ever heard of him. I tried to get sponsors specifically finally, just by chance, I happen to have one bank, and the guy at the bank's like, so who you thinking of bringing in? I'm like, well, I'm thinking about bringing in Jay Bear, but it's like, oh my, Jay Bear, I've read all his books, and he actually got the bank to sponsor Jay. Outside of that one guy, honestly, like Mainers don't seem to be interested in like big names per se. They're interested in the topics and the content. So again, understanding your audience and serving your audience is going to go a long way.
Yeah, that's so funny. Okay, last question on the conferences, and then I just want to switch gears to the podcast. But last question is I know you're putting on a virtual conference. How do you choose? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know obviously like during the pandemic that became the big thing, and I feel
Right.
like there are still people who are hesitant to go back just by virtue of the fact that it's costs a lot less money. But from your perspective, how do you choose? Let's start there on if it should be virtual versus in person.
So we've only done one summit as Agents of Change. We've done other virtual events. I think I'd like to do the summit. In some ways, it was a lot less work for my team because obviously there's no travel logistics, there's no hotel, there's none of that piece. I was told that we should pre-record all the sessions beforehand and I would interview them. And then we did 3 days. So basically it was 10 presentations a day, 3 days in a row. I had to be on the call for each one while they recorded it, so it would feel like it was all happening seamlessly. Then I had to watch them again as I was editing them, and then I had to watch them again as I was hosting it for 3 days straight. That was too heavy a lift for me. Next time I do it, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. But in terms of how to choose it, it was a very similar idea. It was instead of it being a local audience, this was more of like a national or international audience. But I'm like, what do these people want to know, and how can I pull in the best speakers possible? But it was the same rigmarole. I mean, they all came through the podcast as guests. I had gotten a chance to vet them all, and I built the day upon itself. Like each day had a central theme. I think one was about driving traffic to the website. The next thing was more about like traffic and conversion, or rather website and conversion. And the last day was kind of like measurement and everything else. So I really, again, tried to create that curated event that I thought would be valuable because I didn't expect many people to watch all 3 days from beginning to end. So I really want to do it where if you're only going to choose one day that you can do it, or even a half day, what makes the most sense for you? So those were some of the approaches that I took. And then as far as whether you should put on a live event or an in-person event or a virtual event, some of it's going to come down to budget. I mean, if you are a local provider of services, I'd rather see you do something in person because there's just an energy that comes from an in-person event that you cannot replicate on a webinar. I mean, we've all gone to webinars or virtual summits, and let's be honest. The first question we have is, I wonder if I have to be there live or can I get the recording, which I know I'll never watch, but I'll still sign up for it. You can have my email address. And that's fine on some level, but it's not the same. And we all know, like, even if we're present for an event, a virtual event, we're checking emails, we're doing this other thing. It's like when you get people in a room and they see everybody else paying attention, taking notes, raising their hand, asking questions, that's a much different experience. And you're really building a brand there that you can't replicate very well, at least in a virtual event. That being said, there are great benefits to a virtual event. I mean, it's great for list building. It doesn't cost people anything to get there. So you're able to serve a wider audience. So there's not a one size fits all here. You are going to have different, based on your objectives, you're going to decide what's going to be better for you. But that would be the first question that I start asking myself.
Yeah. And I had a question here of just should does this work for all businesses in general, like putting on events? And I think you kind of answered it in terms of like, do you have something unique to say? Do you have something unique to offer to your
Or do you
customers? I
need
mean,
to educate your audience, right? Like,
yeah.
we're having it right as we speak. I'm in the office, but back home, we're having a tree removed. I kind of wish I was watching them take this tree down. The tree was going to come down on its own otherwise. I don't think the tree company needs to be putting on a live event, right? They're not going to serve their customers. They're not going to earn any business that way. There may be some other things that they could do that would earn them PR, earn them buzz, earn them word of mouth. But I can't imagine that there's enough content for the general public, their customer, to be doing this. Now, if you were the creator of a new way of cutting down trees and you put on a live or a virtual event that was geared towards tree removal specialists, that makes sense to me. It's education, it's promotion. So I think you always have to look at what you're doing and who you're speaking to and what they need from you to make a business decision or make a buying decision. And then you can decide, are events something that I should be investing in?
Love that. Yeah. Well, let's transition now to the podcast, because I want to ask the same question. I mean, you've kind of connected the dots for us between the Agents of Change podcast and how it kind of interacts with running the conference and vetting the speakers and that sort of thing. Do you think a podcast then is necessary to run a successful event?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think these are two separate things that just happen to be under the same banner for me, and I've used one to feed the other as far as vetting speakers and a way to promote the conference as well. So I think that they work hand in hand really well together, but I got started on the podcast just because it was an easy way for me to create content. It got me the ability to ask experts questions that they might not tell me the answers to otherwise, but once you give them an audience and you make it more of a mutual exchange, they're much more forthcoming. It also gives me an opportunity to get on a call with people like you, where it's like, we don't really know each other, but let's kind of bond, because as it turns out, not only do we both like superheroes, judging from what's going on in our backgrounds, but in fact, I was just in New York City and I picked up this new Spider-Man on the cover of a New York Times art. But anyway, and we also both did jazz saxophone, which I just learned today. So, it's like, I find that the podcast is like, even though it's not really social media, in some ways it's a very social medium where we can connect and build bonds and opportunities that we might not have. And I've hired guests in the past. It's like, I'll have somebody on there, they're a Facebook ads expert, and I'll be like, hey, can you do some training with my team, because I'd like to up their game or something like that. So I think that for me, it's just become I wouldn't say it's an easy way for me to create content that's valuable for the brand and valuable for Flyte New Media. And it has a lot of other benefits as well. That's been one of the biggest reasons why I keep doing it. And in fact, we're actually, as of the date of this recording, tomorrow we're going to drop our 600th episode,
Ooh.
which is just crazy to me. That's like basically 12 years of doing a podcast. So I've been doing it for a while, and I moved away from blogging, which I used to do 3 to 4 times a week. I'd create a blog. And now I'm doing 1 podcast a week. There were times when I was having 2 podcasts at the same time. That became too much. And as we started tracking our time more accurately, I never track my time just as a company owner. I rarely have to, but we decided we track every minute just to see what we were doing. And it turns out I'm spending like 2.5 to 3 hours a week on the podcast, like triple the amount of time I thought I was spending. But I still think it's a valuable investment of my time in terms of creating content, building relationships, both with my guests as well as my audience. There's just learning new things on a regular basis. Like, it's been a phenomenal experience for me, and I hope to be able to put out another 600 episodes.
Yeah, well, congrats on 600. And I think it's probably worth wrapping up here. I want to give Rich a big thank you. People can find you multiple places. We got the Flyte New Media website, Agents of Change podcast. Look out for that. Look out for episode 600. And then people can connect with Rich on LinkedIn. Rich, did I miss anything? What's one thing that you wish I would have asked you here that I didn't ask you?
Great question. I don't know. You did a really good job of asking great questions. And so I don't know that there was anything specific. I would just say that, if people are listening and they're trying to figure out what to do to raise their own profile online and off, that Maybe it's going to be events, maybe it's going to be podcasts, but I think in the age of AI, one of the things that you should look to do is things that maybe aren't scalable, but are very human. So because I'm a huge proponent of AI and I've really been pushing my team to use it in more and more of what we're doing, but I've also said that it's very key that we still make, in fact, it's more important than ever that we make human connections. And maybe that's part of the reason, bringing things back, why I like putting on events and why I like putting on a podcast, because I get to speak to real human beings. Those are the kind of connections, and that's the kind of way to build your brand and build your network that AI is not going to necessarily be able to take away or steal from you. So I would invest in your own human connections and your team's human connections, and that's a great way of raising your profile, building your brand, and generating more business for your company.
I love it. Rich Brooks, Agents of Change, the president of Flyte New Media. Thank you so much for coming on. A reminder, everybody, like, subscribe. But if you have questions about any of the stuff that Rich talked about today, about the podcast, about his conference, about putting on events, a comment on the videos, comment on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to relay your questions over to Rich, or if he'll answer them himself. So thanks again, Rich. I really appreciate it.
I had a great time today.
Likewise. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Good luck out there.